Are all right. Well, let's get things started and people can jump in as they arrive. Just to officially start tonight, I'm Jenna Stenson. I'm the Executive Director of the Craft Council, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's presentation. To start off, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that Alberta is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And those of us joining from Alberta are on traditional lands referred to as Treaties 6, 7, and 8 territories. And all of us are beneficiaries of these peace and friendship treaties. And the Alberta Craft Council is dedicated to ensuring that the spirit of these treaties are honored and respected. And welcome to tonight's presentation with Charles Lewton-Brain, master goldsmith, artist, author, educator, and craft advocate. Many of us in the space tonight have enjoyed having Charles as an instructor in jewelry and metals at AU Arts and around the world. He's made such impact in the field, but I will let Megan Black, our guest moderator for the evening, introduce Charles more formally. We're really excited to have Megan here with us tonight. For those of you who don't know Megan, she is a legend in the craft scene in Canada. She's the director of the Canadian Crafts Federation. She also has a degree in jewelry from Ontario College of Art and Design, but for the past 15 years or more, she has been the director of the Canadian Crafts Federation. So she works directly with professional craft organizations across the country to collaborate on national and international projects, and she advocates provincially, territorially, and federally at all levels of government for the rights of individual craft artists, for our organizations and our institutions. And she represents us on the world stage at places like Chengdu International Craft Biennale, where we met in 2009, and has attended conferences around the globe. So I'm really excited to have Megan and her unique perspective here tonight leading us in this talk. So I'll just hand it over to you, Megan Black.
Oh, thanks so much, Jenna. And I'm so glad that our paths crossed when we did meet in Korea and have been working together ever since. So thank you for all your kind words. I want to thank Jenna and Charles and the entire Alberta Craft Council membership and board at large for the invitation to participate in the event tonight. It's a real honor to be here. So I'm delighted to join you all tonight from my home here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. I live on the shores of the Wolastoq River in the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqi, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy people. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live in a culturally rich and diverse community, and I hope that the land acknowledgements that both Jenna and I have given tonight encourage you, no matter where you are, across the country or across the globe, to reflect on the land and the community that you call home. As Jenna mentioned, I'm the director of the Canadian Crafts Federation, and in that position, I've had the opportunity to visit so many amazing places and meet so many incredible artists in every corner of the country. It's been a real honor to be able to do that, and Alberta is absolutely no exception to the rule. Every time I've been working with the Alberta Craft Council or visiting either Calgary or Edmonton or the surrounding areas, haven't made it quite everywhere just yet, but I've had an excellent experience and always been treated really, really well, and always been impressed with the quality of work and the quality of the education, the quality of the Craft Council, everything that's going on in Alberta. I'm always blown away by what you people are doing out there. It's an honor to work for the National Art Service Organization for Craft, one that recognizes contributions and the value of every citizen of craft. And tonight we're going to hear from someone who I consider to be one of the most accomplished, giving, talented, and thoughtful artists from this field, Charles Lewton-Brain. Now, to list all that Charles has done for this community would pretty much take us through to tomorrow morning, no matter what time zone you're in right now. I could rhyme off his many accomplishments, including his studies and his teaching in Germany, Canada, and the United States, his many publications on his research and techniques, his status as the inventor of the fold forming technique, which is now used in studios around the world, his leadership on the board of directors for countless organizations, including, of course, the Alberta Craft Council and the Canadian Crafts Federation, His partnership with Dr. Hanneman Aspler to create the Gnoxon website, the largest resource of jewelry and metalsmithing educational materials in the world, or his countless exhibitions, residencies, and awards, including the 2012 Sadie Bronfman Award for Excellence in Fine Craft, which is the highest honor for craft in Canada. There's so much more that I could list from his CV alone, but above all else, Charles is a thinker. He's a maker, an artist, a master in his chosen field. He sees the world from a unique perspective, and he definitely shares that perspective through his work. Whether it's jewelry, sculpture, writing, teaching, or in my opinion, the big one, arts administration, he shared his passion and his knowledge openly. Charles and I have worked together through the Canadian Crafts Federation for the entire time I've been with the organization. I started back in 2006. I think Charles was actually responsible for hiring me, so thank you, Charles, for that. I certainly appreciate it. And he was the president of the organization when I first started as a project coordinator. I learned so much personally from Charles, not only about the craft field, but about how the structure works, how the system works, how nonprofits work, how to communicate with government, how to communicate with artists, how to just be an open person who is willing to have conversations, think about things from different perspectives, and really try to understand how across Canada, we all have similarities and we all have differences. And there's this beauty in the craft that spans across the country. And just being able to see through Charles's eyes when I first started, and then throughout the many years I've been with this organization, has been an honor and a pleasure. I can't even remember how many places we've traveled to together, Charles, but it's always a riot. And I always appreciate when you've opened doors for me to participate in that. And I certainly know I'm not the only one who's had that experience working with you. So your influence is global, your personality is unmatched, and your creativity is unstoppable. Charles is a philosopher, a mentor, and an inspiration, and I am honored to also call him a friend. Here to give us a little bit of insight into his current exhibition, Holding Rocks, at the Alberta Craft Gallery and the C-Space King Edwards Arts Hub in Calgary, which is open for 2 more days. So those of you who are local can visit Friday from 12 to 4 and Saturday from 11 to 4. Get out there if you haven't seen it. Is the one and the only Charles Lewton-Brain.
For a bit there at the beginning, I was wondering who you were talking about. But I remember there were very few of us. We were reconstructing the Canadian Craft Federation from ashes. And we made some bad hiring decisions. And Megan was a summer intern. And everything blew up. It was bad. And all of a sudden, the 2 of us who were still involved were like, wait a minute, she's competent. Let's ask her. And that was the beginning. So.
I didn't know it was quite that bad at the time. But you did great bringing me in. Thank you very much for opening the door.
Okay, thank you. So let's get going, I guess. And a warning that the vagaries of Zoom and everything, it's going to be glitchy. You betcha. Things changed since yesterday, but let's see what we can do. All right. It'll take me a moment to attempt to set things up. Okay. And apparently it is there. And can you see it? I'm not getting any feedback.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's a good start. And so the reason for this is this Holding Rocks exhibition. And let's just start with, this is back when I had hair. And Megan took all of the good bits from my intro, yeah, we built a very large website that still exists today, although I'm no longer involved except as an advisor. And one of the best moments of my life was winning a Governor General's Award, which already is like a long time ago. And this is the only time that a craftsperson ever gets work in the National Gallery. So that's me pointing at the National Gallery sign, because there's no place for craft in it as such. Although over the years, we've had many conversations, and it was pointed out to me once that if craft could come up with, at that point, $1.5 million, the last time I checked it was 5 million, this would endow a curator and they would somehow find space for craft in the National Gallery. I'm a teacher, and that has been a joy and a driving force in my life. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. That feedback, that interaction of minds, that's a kick. So let's have a look at where I work. This is my messy studio, and this is a view of my bench, and a view across where I sit when I'm working like that. And another view of my guest bench, and a view of a different area of the shop, polishing area and machines and such like. And this is where the cage work happens. This is a fusion welder. This was originally used for orthodontic welding, that is making braces. And I use it for welding stainless steel, which I then electroform on. And these are the two electrodes that I use to connect. I almost touch them. I place the steel wire in between them, and then I press a foot pedal. And in this way, I can build structures in wire, which I then grow metal onto. This is a, let's see if I can kill that. This is the top of the Alberta University of the Arts mace, which I finished over the last year, and this was all grown on. This was actually a test moment, and you can see how rocks occur and rocks live. And here is how the welding works. I've got my electrode. I take two wires, I hold them together in the right place, and I press the foot pedal, and that fuses them, that welds them in place. And here's an image of another piece being set up for welding, and another one. And this is where I grow this rather nasty looking bucket, which is cleaner right now, but when I took the video, it wasn't. Contains copper sulfate and acid. And this is one of the rectifiers, one of the ways that I use electricity to drive metal onto the wire. Here's a different view of one of the rectifiers. And this is what the objects look like when they're growing. So I construct a stainless steel structure, and I insert it into this liquid, which is a nice 1870s recipe. And in fact, what I do is old, somewhere between 1830, that's when they started this, and in the 1870s, they were really going well. And so that is, that's what I use. And I rather like that link with time. Oh, subtext, it's very primitive. And during the electroforming, this kind of thing is going on all the time. There are variations in the connections and how things are placed and all of that. I call it farming as I move things. So this is a large neck piece laid out, ready for electroforming. And this is after the electroforming. And that's a closer look. After this, it gets sent out for gold electroforming, so 24 karat gold. is placed on top, grown on top, and electroforming is thicker than plating. Plating goes up to a certain thickness, and after that it's called electroforming. And that is a previous cat that would, of course, sit bang in the middle of whatever it was you were working on. So throughout my career, and with that Governor General's thing, the binding thread, because that's what those people are interested in, is what's the connection, is the grid. And in looking back through my work in time, I have used the grid forever. And the grid to me means it represents structure, it represents culture, it represents how we organize things, the patterns that we create ourselves, that we build ourselves. This was from 1982 when I was in the high Arctic working with Inuit, and I was deeply disturbed by the issues between Inuit and white culture. And there's a whole long story with this, but basically that rusted steel around the outside of this 8-centimeter diameter brooch is from rusted barrels in a valley near Frobisher Bay, now called Iqaluit. And this valley is, the barrels are about 100 feet deep, and it goes for 1.5 miles, and the valley's like, you know, half a kilometer wide, and it's full. And that was from the Second World War. So grid is culture, grid is us, grid is how we create things. For a long time, I did performance work on like fashion shows and performance venues. And these are just some examples of gridded objects that were part of that work. And the one in the middle, that had to do with an AIDS benefit. And it was about medical. But a lot of this is all about choice. These were more of the performance pieces on the top left and on the top right. That's my friend Mark, a musician, who got used to me saying, come on over, I need to take pictures. And on the left-hand side is an interesting object. I was concerned with changing the meaning of something with a single stroke. And so that object on the left, that is a towel rack from an abandoned Tennessee motel. And by changing context, I could change the object so you couldn't tell what it was. On the lower right was a brooch from a large series called Selling the Culture, The Real Thing, which was around when Reagan was in charge, and the US designed the Star Wars system, which had satellite-based weapons, land-based missiles and other things, all of which were to be placed in Canada, and they hadn't asked the Canadians. This was assumed. And so that piece on the lower right, it's a grid. It has my blood in it, nice graphic mark, and hair. And this is the cage work. So this is where it went. So I'm constructing these things. I'm growing metal. I am thinking of this in terms of what it represents, culture, rules, what we do to ourselves. And the reason that I believe this particular work is I think it's pretty, is that there is a nice tension between the structure, the grid, and the surface, which is nature. Because of this nice 1870s way that I'm growing things, you know, it's like there's a little bit of random in there and I guide the random, but it's like growing coral onto a surface. And those little textures, yeah, I can guide them and I can even make them happen, but that tension between structure and nature, that is what I believe is beautiful about these things. And early on, stones began to be incorporated. And again, this is a bit of a reference to nature, to bringing nature in, but you can see that they are caged, that our structures, are restricting the stone. We're elevating it, we're framing it, we're making it pretty, but we're also trapping it. This is early bracelet. What do I mean early? Okay, the cage work starts around the year 2000. And we're looking at pieces that are 2008, 2010, something like that. And this idea of entrapment, and because of the way it's grown, the metal literally grows around the stone, not just trapping it, but setting it. And so there is a relationship between the growth and the stone inside. And this is one of my own pieces, which I wear. And over on the right, you can see how there's this feeling of compression of not just growing against, but a tension between the framework and the object itself. And what do I like about stones? Well, you know, when I was a little kid, you pick them up, you fill your pockets, you bring them home, you fill the back seat of the car with them. You pick them up because they're beautiful. And stones, to me, they represent place. So these particular ones, these were from Nova Scotia, where I lived for a decade. And, but all the recent ones, they're from the Bow Valley. And so the ones in this exhibition are from there. But again, we have, it's about setting up tensions of different kinds, a feeling of not just pressure, but here the stone is not merely being imprisoned, but you can feel that it's pushing against the grid, that it's not quite escaping yet, but it's resisting the structure. And a ring. And another one. Oh, the mesh, the sort of cloth-like reference. There is perhaps a hint of Band-Aid in there. And I've always worked, like for most of my career, with the following colors: black, red, and gold. And black represents mortality, and red is life, and gold is making things precious. This was a river pebble, and entrapped and grown into. And in this one, I had a piece of turquoise. And in this particular turquoise, there was a matrix, that is a web work of other material, which happened to be iron rich. So I could immerse this in the solution, and the web work, the matrix, is where the electricity traveled, and that's where it grew. Didn't do the turquoise much good, but it was pretty. And this is from a group I did working with a gem cutter from Germany named Dieter Lorenz. And I collected his work for many years, and each piece he did was completely individual. They were like drawings. And so I would frame them and work with them. I have probably about 20 in this series. And that's me going, oh my, I need a picture. I don't have a model. Let's see what we can do. And this was from the Cage series. There was a group of ear structures that I built. There were about 12 or 14 in this group, which, by the way, is an exhibition in case anybody would like to exhibit them. But the model was the guy who was tiling the bathroom. His name was Lazar Pepushka. And I really needed some pictures. And Lazar came to work one day, and I said, Lazar, would you mind coming out back and, I'll put a screen up and I'll take some pictures. And he's like, sure. And then once we were set up, I said, Lazar, would you mind taking your shirt off? And he said, sure. And this was in the National Gallery. It's called Burqa. And, it's the gilded cage. It's along the same lines as the previous objects. It's in the series. And now we move towards this show, the Holding Rocks show. And this was an early piece. This was done a couple of years ago, but this piece and one or two relatives were what gave rise to the idea about, it doesn't have to be wearable. It doesn't have to be functional. You can just look at it and appreciate it and see the tensions and collaborations between the different parts of the object.
So please do feel free to throw some questions for Charles into the chat. I'll keep an eye on those, but I have a couple of them to start if you don't mind. You talked about the grid, the idea of the grid representing culture and structure and the cultures that we bring to the table maybe, but also the structures that we create to manipulate those things. And you also mentioned that piece dealing with Reagan and the Star Wars issue and all of that. Maybe this is a contentious question, but we're living in a really crazy world where structures are shifting and changing with our influence and without it. How are you feeling about this work maybe in particular in light of everything that's going on right now, whether you want to think about it from political or health or, it's a changing world. How has that affected your idea of this grid?
I try and ignore Mr. T, but yeah, of course, it's first comes up on my Google search. I would say that the themes of the work, the larger themes, have been around for a long time and carry through whatever's happening now. And it's more of a comment on, look, we make this up. We make it all up. And we have choices about how to make that up. And when it comes to the wider world, nature, then how we interact with that, we make it up. And yeah. Have you read Sapiens?
I have not, no.
Oh, I highly recommend it. I bogged down before I read the whole thing, but it was really, it had a good premise. And the functional premise was that there were dozens of species of hominid, okay? And we're the only one left of those particular dozens of kinds, right? And so his question was, how come? And his answer was that we, Homo sapiens, we are the best at making shit up. That we're the only ones that really lie, okay? Now, animals do lie for certain reasons and certain kinds of things, but we're really good at it. And not only that, but we create everything, from business to religion to everything. We make it up. And that particular strategy has been rather successful in terms of, maybe survival and growth. But when I was a kid, okay, it's a long time ago. When I was a kid, there were 3 billion people in the world. And now it's over 8 billion in one lifetime. That's nuts. That's like crazy. And so anyway, the premise that we make it up, I think, is an interesting premise and allows you to escape perhaps blind belief in something that's said without, cross-checking it a bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good answer, Charles. I've got a couple questions from the audience that are specifically tied to the exhibition. So a quick housekeeping piece. Someone asked if the exhibition would come to the Edmonton Craft Gallery. I'm sorry to inform you that you have missed your opportunity to see it in Edmonton. The show was there in 2019, so you'll have to hoof it down to Calgary if you have the opportunity in the next 2 days. Someone else asked about the exhibition. There's currently only one piece that's in the show that has the title Quail. So why does that one piece have a name? And on the flip side, maybe why don't the other pieces have names?
Well, I try and name things so I can find them on the computer. That's what I teach. Is the prime reason for titles is that when you get 2,000 or 3,000 objects, you're totally up the creek. And a catalog number like D471 means absolutely nothing, but a title will trigger a memory of what you're looking for. In terms of why that one, I thought I'd named more of them for that reason, but perhaps I was in a rush or something.
I wonder, just riffing off of that, like, do you call them anything in particular, even if it doesn't end up on the tombstone or on the card for the piece? Like, do you call it the one from Nova Scotia or the one from whatever, like an episode title of Friends? Do you have like a random way that you describe them?
No, many years ago as a student, I shared a house with a Japanese guy, Mayao Umesao, who has for a long time been like a culture maven in Kyoto. And he was a potter. And one of the things he taught me was that the object itself is not as important as its place in a sequence. And that when you make something, it drops off your hand and you're not really connected to it anymore. You can find connections and all of that, but the flow is more important than the individual object, and that was important for me, and it let me like stop clinging to something that I'd spend a month on. It's like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. Well, that was yesterday.
I'm going to be a bad moderator and tell you a little story. So when I was in university, or just after I graduated, I did a co-op very briefly at the Royal Ontario Museum. And one of the things they did with us there was take us into like the stacks, the behind the scenes collections. And they let me hold this ceramic pot from like 10,000 years ago. And it had an imprint in the wet clay of the hand of the person who had made it. And I remember having my hand on top of this handprint and just like, A, being terrified I was going to drop it, and B, just feeling this like spark of life and energy that I don't know what word, but like it just transformed between the ages, right? There's something about a hand-to-hand object between time that does this crazy magical thing. So when you're talking about like the idea of objects in a sequence, maybe I guess the question that I'm getting at with this is maybe what is it about objects for you? Like, why did you take this particular path of creating? What is it about like the physical form of something and maybe the sequence in which it comes to life that's interesting for you?
That's a whole long story.
Sorry.
I will see if, no, but I'll see if I can sum up a couple of bits. I was going to be a graphic designer and illustrator. And I ended up taking a jewelry course in my first semester because I'd gone to visit my girlfriend that summer in Tawas, and a native guy named Sonny Spruce, a Hopi, had taught me how to grind a turquoise by hand. Interestingly enough, Mathieu Cheminade, a very important Canadian writer and maker, he's a metalsmith because Sonny Spruce taught him when he was 21. So anyway, interesting. And for me, two things attracted me. One was tactility, that the tactility of this thing that jewelers do was really important. And the second thing was that the apparent complexity, the apparent unending field of things you needed to know attracted me. but I've spent my entire life in this field making things faster and getting closer to the instant decision making, right or wrong, that I used to have with pen and ink. So actually, almost everything I do relates to drawing in some way or another, but maybe not drawing with pencils.
Cool.
Okay.
I have a technical question for you. I'm taking you all over the map here, Charles. Muriel asked, are the stones in the cages when they're grown? Like, do they live in there in that solution? And does that impact them other than the piece where it grew in a particular way because of the matrix? But
well, I also put gemstones in, you know, and there's been the occasional interesting failure, but you know, like river pebbles they've been through a lot before they got to me. And so, yeah, no, they have to survive up to 3 weeks in a sulfuric acid bath. And then they have to be placed into a tumbler. So I beat them up with like stainless steel chunks for anything up to a couple of days, because I want my jewelry to be the same. If you drop it on the floor, I want it to be the same as before you dropped it. So I pre-beat it up. And then they get sent off to the gold electroformer, and they have to survive boiling sodium hydroxide solutions and then super high temperature cyanide solutions. So anything that I use is pretty tough. And I've been surprised by some of the types of gemstones that survive. Because I use gems as well as rocks.
Now, you talked about being surprised and what surprised you. And I always like to ask this as a general question. So this can relate to any time, whether it's your own work or teaching or being involved with organizations. Like, what in the last couple of years maybe has really surprised you about craft or making? That's a pretty big, wide open question, but what's a time that you've been like, oh, that's new or different? What's caught your eye?
I'm not sure I can identify anything specific, but I would say that happens a lot. You know, that's like, oh, that's a good idea. I never thought about things that way before. Or isn't that pretty? Or that one didn't work out. Or, this journey facilitates wonder, and I think wonder is a lovely thing. And so when you see a new idea or a pretty piece or something like that, there is a flash of wonder at it. Where did this come from? How did this come to be? And so I'd say that's a joy from all this.
Such a good description of craft in general. Sorry, go ahead.
But that includes being in the studio where either something goes wrong or you do something or you see something, and there's that same kick. It's like, woo, never thought of that before. Anyway.
I love those happy accidents too that take you in a new direction, right?
Yeah.
Someone has asked here, I'm just watching that chat, Charles, with the smaller rock pieces, have you ever thought of them as pocket keepsakes or tokens as a reminder of a place or a situation?
Absolutely. And that whole idea of handheld things that you cradle and touch, and tactility, because it's very intimate. And by, you know, deleting function from the pieces in this show, you know, all I've left you to play with is, you know, oh, okay, it's interesting, it's pretty, feels good. And so weight and all of that. Yes. So tactility is big.
Kayla has asked that, well, she says, you emphasized the capture aspect of your series, that caged aspect. So do you feel like you are the captor of these rocks? Like, is Charles the prison guard?
No, I don't, I'm not that powerful. No, I'm working with the things, and it's not like a mousetrap. It's more a relationship between what we as humans do with structure and with nature and how that plays. And that doesn't mean I think that's the way things should be if we went to the stories side of it. It's more a matter of pointing it out. And it's up to you as the viewer to take stories, ideas, and questions from it.
Nice. And then Flaneur made the comment of the tension of those caged rocks being very visceral, and that you want to possess it. I think the idea of it as a possession is an interesting thing. And just to mention that Charles' work is carried by the Alberta Craft Council Gallery in their shop in both Edmonton and Calgary, so you can possess a piece of your own if you so choose. But how do you feel about that idea of possession? Because people are collecting your work, they collect rocks. Like you talked even earlier about
rocks.
yeah, I mean, I have a basket of rocks in my front porch from places that I've been and just interesting moments in life and stuff like that. I mean, even as an adult, I've got pockets full of rocks. But how do you feel about that idea of possession when it comes to your work?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I really like the word possession, although I understand it has a lot of different meanings, you know. But I'm a jeweler, and jewelry, a lot of it has to do with the body. So does this. This is in your hand. This is intimate, you know. It's still about the body. I would actually still term this non-functional work jewelry, okay? But the purpose of jewelry, first of all, it's the oldest form of human activity that is findable because, you know, wood rots and all that stuff. And so jewelry goes back to 140,000 years now. And in every case, it's beads. But the function of jewelry, it's about memory. It's like a tattoo, all right? And so when you have a piece of jewelry, you imbue it with meaning. The act of buying it or wearing it is chock full of meaning. And just like that rock you picked up that you go, oh yeah, I remember Cape Split. So I have pictures of the show coming up. Should we?
Yeah, take us on the next step of your visual journey here. Sorry, I got real excited and into the questions, but I know you've got more to go.
I don't think there's a problem with that. I just didn't want to, you know, bore people. And in fact, what I would like to do is to take a break. So we will begin with that. And now we move to the show. Just a question. Can people see?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And I must say that the work of the Crafts Council people is amazing. And in my career and in my life, I would not have done nearly as well if it hadn't been for that kind of work. Is that the same one? Oh, well, nothing wrong with seeing it twice. I mean, the exhibition was so beautifully done and presented, both in Edmonton and in Calgary. And so this is just giving us a little hint of the space, a little hint of what it looks like and feels like. And so to finish, we will just look at a few of these pieces. And so there's a lot of choices going on, both from years of collecting rocks I thought were worth looking at, to responding to the particular shape with the structure I was building around it. And again, this this feeling of tension between nature and grid, and then nature on the grid, so that the textures there, to me, they're very much about nature. This rock has holes in it right the way through, a lucky rock. And another view of the same piece. And as Jennifer noticed in her piece, sometimes you have growths of copper and then gold onto the surface of the rock itself. And that has to do with whether it's conductive or not, whether there's some mineral in that part that conducts electricity and grows from that place. But really the tactility is a big part of these. You really want to hold it in your hand and keep it in your pocket. The way that the material grows is interesting. Electroforming is actually building at the atomic level. You are landing literally one atom at a time onto the metal surface. And in electroforming and electroplating, you have two poles. And if you remember in elementary school, maybe you had a horseshoe magnet and a piece of paper and you put iron filings on it and they would make patterns. You would have these arc-like patterns between the two poles and the filings would line up like that. Those are called lines of force. And the same lines of force occur in electroforming when you're plating inside this solution. And so, as I said, it's an atom at a time. So once it starts to build, if you have a little bit of, say, copper oxide, which is it's a molecule, it's a chunk, and it's not a single copper atom, which is what's being built. And that lands on your growing surface. Well, now it has a physical lump. I mean, it's microscopic, but it has a physical lump. And because it's closer to the other electrode, it grabs some of those lines of force. And it's the electrons landing that convert copper ions from the solution into metal copper. And so a little tiny lump will gather more electricity and hence grow faster. And so these lumps accelerate. And so that's part of the nature of this. This is how they grow. And when I said it grows like Carl, yeah, that's how I feel about it. So we've got, references to basket, to cradle, not merely cage or confinement, but cradling as well, making precious, framing the piece of nature, the stone inside. When you see these in person, they're much more subtle than in these images. And if you get to hold one, there's plenty to look at. Ah, there's Jennifer's. And you can see how the metal has grown onto some portion of it that was conductive. And we see a reflection of the nature of the rock itself, what minerals were embedded in it and grew with it. Yeah, that's, you can tell, I really like that piece. So I'm glad it's gone to a good and happy home. That's lovely. This is a slate. Oh, and the rocks that I choose, unless I'm using gemstones, the rocks that I choose, their surfaces are altered by nature. So I want, you know, I'm acknowledging and looking at that. So this piece of slate fell out of a bank and tumbled down a river and was, you know, washed and beaten up for, you know, millennia. And now I chose it and have made it a focus. The lines are also, there are elements of communication going on. That is, lines of communication. But to hold it really is a different kind of pleasure. And so the tactility, that thing that drew me to metals in the first place, that tactility is definitely part of these objects. The empty spaces have some importance as well. And like this one, it makes an actual frame around the surface of the rock itself so that you pay attention to that as well, not just the whole object. It's a picture within a picture. I rather like this one too. I thought this was quite successful. So am I drawing to make these? No, well, sometimes, but mostly not. Mostly I pick the rock up and then I build against it. And so what's happening is reflective of that moment of making decisions. And that brings us back to drawing again, and again with pen and ink, where you make a decision. And what I like is that, although you can backtrack on these, I like to make a decision that just is. And if you got it right, if you got lucky, that was good. And I used to believe that with my work, about 5% of my pieces were any good. I think it's better now. I think it's close to 40, 50%. But a lot of it just has to do with keeping on going. But you can see how the wires reflect the rock, how they cradle it, how they respond to it. There's an intimacy between the structure and the object as well. It is not just about keeping something inside. And again, we see empty space as being important. The shapes of the empty space. And as the metal grows, it grows sideways over the rock surface. If you think back to the thin wires, that's how it starts. So there's a lot of growth, and that growth can take anywhere from 4 days to 3 weeks of gentle, slow growth, an atom at a time, building onto the surface. Each piece is catalog numbered and stamped with my trademark. And again, there's a play between surfaces, rock surface and metal surface. And those are the images I have from the show. This picture is by Mitch Kern. And I wanted to thank the ACC staff, directors, all of you, because we've all done so much for people in the West and beyond as a model and through influence. And I want to thank Megan for being here, and I want to thank her for her work, leadership, and making the world a better place.
Well, thanks, Charles. That's so sweet. Do we have time for a couple of quick questions at the end here?
I think we are
Victoria
scheduled.
says yes.
Yeah, no, we're scheduled till 8:30, so we've got. Yeah.
So there were a couple of questions that popped up in the chat that I want to highlight here. Someone asked a pretty straightforward question: how many pieces are in this series? Like you said, you've been making them essentially since the early 2000s. Do you, you say they're cataloged? Do you have a total number?
Okay, with the holding rocks type, probably about 30 to 35. But with the whole thing, let's just say that I've only photographed my way through probably a quarter of the finished pieces, because for the gold electroforming, it takes, it can be a year to 2 years before I build up enough pieces to send them in for that stage. So they'll be, you know, I'm working steady, and then once every 2 years, I'll send in like 400 pieces. And so I don't have an accurate count, but I would say probably in the range of 3,000 since the year 2000, of most of which are in my photography space, waiting to be cataloged and entered. It's all such a crazy amount of work.
That's incredible, Charles. That's like an incredible amount of work in that timeline. You should be proud of yourself.
Well, thank you. But you can make all the stuff you want, but unless somebody buys it or sees it, it has not fulfilled its function.
I wanted to ask about the scale of the work, because I think that there's something really beautiful about the intimacy of the connection to the human body and the hand. But you did work in bigger sort of pieces that were almost bigger than the body, right?
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
the biggest size piece that you could make with? Would it be like the size of that bucket would be your maximum, or could you make them bigger? I'm just curious. I'm not saying you should.
At one point, I had a grant, and I bought a really gigantic bucket, which at a certain point I realized I wasn't going to use, so I gave it to the school that I was teaching at, where I believe it's used for pickle if they still have it. My experience is that if you want to build big stuff, the short answer is that you tile it, you tessellate it, you do smaller chunks, and then you build out. But for me, something in the range of about 3 feet is probably the most I can squeeze out of my equipment without beginning to tile it, without beginning to add.
Wow. Even that is significant for a single piece, right?
Yes, but most of the time I do smaller stuff.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple of comments about the idea of these frames or of these cages, or, you know, putting it on the positive side, the idea of an exoskeleton. Carolyn Young suggested that they, like, do you think of these things as not necessarily compressing those rocks or imprisoning them, but creating a protection for them in a way?
Yes, absolutely. There's a whole range of interpretations, and that's certainly something that flashes across. There's no one answer. There's a whole lot of possibilities raised, and if I have evoked someone's thought into could it be an exoskeleton, why, yes. And yes, I'm sure I've thought of it that way too. Many years ago in Nova Scotia, I was at a craft fair and I was selling, and I wore a suit. I was the first person to wear a suit at a craft fair in Nova Scotia. I was also the first person with lights, anyway, which I built. And there was this guy. Oh, I built the cases. It was beautiful. And so there was this guy, and he was staring at this one piece of mine, and it was shaped like a lozenge. It was a pendant, and it was in a case. And he stood and he stared at it for 20 minutes. And eventually I walked up to him. I said, you know, how are you doing? And stuff. And he looked up at me and he said, is it a dory? Okay. So a dory's a maritime boat, and it has that shape. And to me, the interesting thing was he liked it. He knew he liked it. He liked it enough to stare at it for 20 minutes, but he needed it to be something. And he worked at it so hard until he had something that he could relate to. But he still responded to the object.
We've got a little humorous question from Kayla that I think also relates to what Tara said, where she suggested that 3,000 pieces was a conservative estimate. She suspects it's many more. But Kayla asks, what do you think the most significant lesson, excuse me, what do you think the most significant lesson has been from the first rock to the 3,000th rock? She says she's asking because she's doing a multiples assignment, but also just out of interest.
I don't know about a specific lesson, but there is a flow. So something I did 3 years ago doesn't look like something I do today. And so there is an evolution, a shift. But interestingly enough, I found over time that, you know, I'll suddenly go back and do something in a mode or a technique that I did 30 years ago, and I'm still having fun with it, but I'll, you know, so it's not like it's a progression. It's like, you know, well, I want to do that, or I want to do that, and I've built that particular vocabulary so that I can. In terms of the progression, lessons from multiples, if you really want to do multiples, you do a lot of drawing. And I mean, not painstaking little drawing. I mean, you take pages, and let's say you needed to do something in a particular frame or shape, right? And you fill that page with 50. And then you sit there and seconds you go, this, 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 and you repeat that. And then you take another page and you do that. And it's like being a photographer where, you know, a professional photographer, they will shoot 500 pictures with the goal of 3 good ones. And one of the advantages of multiples is you get to burn through a lot of bad ideas. And in my experience, you know, it's a good idea is a matter of luck and refinement. But I will just say as well that I consider this work, it's one of a kind production, all right? No piece is the same as any other. I might be using the same vocabulary of technique. I might be using the same vocabulary of visual parameters, right? You know, color, texture, or whatever, or references or meaning, right? But one of the things I've always done is even when I make very, very similar pieces, it's not the same as any other piece. So even if you buy one of my production pieces, you know it's unique.
We've got one question from Patrick, who's curious he's curious if you consider that you're working at scale versus actual size. And I think what they mean is, oh, well, they say, how do you feel your recent work sits beyond the scale of your hand? And maybe they mean physically, but maybe they just mean emotionally too.
Well, I'll go with the last one because it's easy. But the some objects scale up easily or down easily. So, and that's one of the critical evaluations you make when you're critiquing an object, as you look at it in different ways and examine it and divvy it up in terms of was this successful or that. Some things live in a particular scale. And if you blew it up to 30 feet, it wouldn't work. And if you shrank it down to 1 centimeter, it wouldn't work. But some things can be blown up. And so I could see one of these holding rocks at 30 feet. I think it would be interesting. It might be pushing it a little bit. But for me, when I'm building it, I am working in that scale. As a jeweler, that's your special thing, is you understand things at the microscopic level because you've stared at them through a 10-power loop during the making. So when you do something, you're actually experiencing it at that microscopic scale as well. In terms of actual scale, usually that's in the plan. You know, like I spent the last year and a half working on this mace for AU Arts, which is really nice. It's really nice. And it involves rocks and cage and electroforming, as well as, you know, probably about 400 hours of other stuff. And so that had to be a bigger scale. This is next to a human. This has function. It's got to operate at 40 feet distance visually and be functional. So for me, objects can scale up and down, depends on the object, but I'm usually aiming for a particular physical scale in my planning, if there is planning. And that planning might be, I like this rock. Well, if I go beyond that, it's going to be ugly. So
well, that leads into a question that someone just added from, when you see a rock, do you know how you're going to cage it, or it kind of evolves in the doing?
Yeah, it's like, that's a nice rock. And then I've got piles and piles of carefully chosen rocks. And actually, this is kind of interesting because when you use gemstones, they have been parsed. They have been selected 100 different times before you get the gemstone. Everything from some person digging and going, this one, to dozens and dozens of people looking at them and sorting them and all the way up. And so even gemstones are done this way. And so when I've got my piles of rocks there, you know, yeah, I picked them. I probably picked the probably pick through a batch like 20 times before I start making piles. And then I'll go, I think I'll work with this one. And I'm not sure if I answered that.
I think so. I just want to jump back to the idea of scale for a minute, because the chat blew up a little bit there, where people were suggesting that you should create a cage series adorning Stonehenge. Or I'm thinking, you live so close to Banff, we could get one of those cages over one of those mountains real easy, I'm sure.
I think it's called Photoshop, and that's a good idea.
I can see them coming out of images of giant rocks,
Well, I mean, like most of what Christo designed never ever got built. Like, probably only 2% of the drawings ever got built, or the pastiche or whatever. So I could totally see a book with altered objects, big objects.
There were a lot of all caps and multiple exclamation point responses of excitement to that idea.
Oh, that's funny.
So we're coming up to the half-hour mark, and I know that the Alberta Craft Council team has some stuff that they want to share with folks before everyone heads out. But I kind of want to fling it over to you, Charles, for a minute. Is there anything that out of this discussion that you think, inspired any extra thoughts or impressions of your own work, maybe? Or is there anything else that you want to leave us with for some words of Charles' wisdom?
Well, I don't know about that, but I will. That whole scale thing's gonna percolate. My ex-wife Dee used to say, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. With the idea that, don't worry about it, just do it. And yeah, something like that.
And maybe an opportunity for a quick plug also. There's a question about whether you'll be doing any teaching in 2020 or 2021, perhaps online.
Yeah, I co-founded a online teachers group a couple of months ago in the pandemic, and we have weekly meetings, and there's like a who's who of the workshop teaching world in this group. There's about 200 people, and so I'm learning a lot about it. I've done a few. I believe that online is here to stay. There are some interesting things looming, like the really big schools like MIT and Harvard and stuff. They're going to go from 20,000 to 500,000 students. And in the process, they're going to take out dozens and dozens of small and medium liberal and arts colleges. They're going to be wiped out because of online. We will at some point get back to physical, and I miss it. But the reality is that, first of all, online's here because of COVID, and it's going to stay. And secondly, it's not going to go away. And thirdly, online dissolves geography, okay? And the schools, nobody really understands the implications of that. And one of the discussions that we've been having, let's say, is exclusivity, right? If I did a workshop in Seattle, that school's going to say, you can't do another workshop within 6 months, within 300 miles. Okay, that's out the flipping window. And so how do you deal with that? And one of the ways is time geography. So if I do a workshop at 3 to 7 p.m., then I will have time zones globally that can take that workshop. And anyway, it's an interesting group. We got lots of discussions. If anybody wants to join in, you can email me or connect with me, and I'm happy to invite you. You have to be invited. But it's everything from, like, what's your tech like, to what are the principles of online teaching where you don't lose people and or hurt people. And yeah, so that's a whole world. So yeah, I'm moving towards that. I've done 2 or 3, but it's a crazy amount of work. just crazy, particularly when it comes to something that involves hands. And there's 100 ways of approaching it. One interesting thing that's emerged is that you can do a lot of synchronous, which means that you're watching it while it's happening, teaching, and make it pretty good using 4 old iPhones and an $8 program for your computer. And so you don't have to spend like $50,000. You can do it with almost nothing. And Milt Fishbein's he's part of the group. He's been doing some experiments in Calgary. So yes, I look forward to the opportunity to teach in person again, but it's not going to be for a while, and online is for keeps. But one of the interesting things is that we're making it up. There are no rules, and everybody is stuck in a paradigm from 12 months ago. Okay, everybody is, because you can't even understand the implications of the shift. And so for me, that's the kind of like you go, because it takes you a while to even get the beginnings of the meaning of this shift. So all that's kind of exciting. And yes, there will be, but there's a lot of detail, and the work is crazy. I mean, for a 4-hour workshop, I spent 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like we've got to get you on Twitch, Charles. I really feel like live streaming Charles from the bench is something I would certainly watch. I want to thank you, and I do want to recognize, like you said, we're making it up, we're figuring it out. That goes right back to what you talked about right at the beginning of the talk, right? About these structures and the grids and how we're constructing, how we're communicating, and all of those things. And I think there's interesting lessons to come for teaching and for continued sharing online about the ethics and about the process and all of those things. And we're just trying to work our way through it, right? So, but I'm grateful to technology so that I can A, do my job in the way that I do it, and B, can be here with all of you, even though I'm on the other side of the country. So I very much appreciate all of your time, everyone who's in the audience. I apologize if I missed anybody's comments or questions. I hope that you'll feel comfortable to reach out to Charles or to talk to the Alberta Craft Council, or to show up at the exhibition for the next 2 days and spend some time contemplating those thoughts with the lens of Charles' theories and ideas about them in front of you. So thank you all, everyone. Thank you so much, Charles. You're a superstar. I love working with you. I love your work. You're awesome.
Thank you.
I'll just turn it back over to Jenna.
Good.
Oh.
Yeah. Jenna's gone. She's just
No,
left.
I'm not gone. I'm still here. And just Megan, thank you so much for moderating. And like Charles said, just this evaporation of timelines and physical space allows us to have people like Megan joining us to moderate all the way from Fredericton. We have people who came tonight from Atlanta, Georgia, and all over. So although we're physically separated, it was a really nice way to spend an evening, Charles, hearing your ideas about your work and your process, but also just that thoughtful space that you created for us in that second half to really just look and enjoy the work was really nice. It was a really nice way to spend an evening with all of you. I really appreciate it and the time that went into putting that together for us. And thank you to everyone again who was able to attend tonight, and for those of you who were able to donate so that we can continue to create paid opportunities for artists to share their work. And speaking of that, we are going to show a little video that Victoria has put together for us to talk about our most recent project of paying artists for their work. It's a fundraiser in support of our members and the Alberta Craft Council. So Victoria, if you want to share that video. And thanks again to Megan and Charles for tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. There was just one question. What's the best way for people to follow you, Charles? You know, kind of like stay in the loop, what's coming up for you?
Oh, I'm pretty bad about updating my website.
On
It's
his
actually,
invisible Instagram.
Don't follow him on Instagram. He doesn't post anything.
yeah, actually, that's quite funny.
You're an Insta ghost.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to break it. I mean, it was, I got on Instagram when I had a flip phone, and about 4 years later, I was teaching a grad course and we're doing social media, and they said, what about you? And at that point, I had 800 followers with not one post, blank. And this was so ironic that I didn't feel I could break it by like actually putting anything up there. I think it's 1,100 followers with nothing at all. And so I'll have to do a new Instagram for that. I just find it funny.
Yeah, you're 1,100. There's nothing. Blank. You're killing us, Charles. But anyway, so Facebook, I just Google probably Charles Lewton-Brain every once in a while, and things will pop up for everyone there.
And Facebook works-ish.
Yeah, sometimes, right?
We do have pieces from Charles' exhibition on our online shop as well. So if you can't get down to the space in Calgary to dibs your piece, they're on our online shop as well that you can get to from the Alberta Craft Council.
That's true. And if you follow us, we're pretty good at stalking Charles. So we'll share any information we have about him.
And
yes.
sometime coming up rather sooner than I would hope for is an exhibition in Banff at Willock Sachs Gallery, and it's going to be concentrated on bowls and vessels, which I've been working on for several years. So just mentioning that's coming up.
Awesome, good to know. Yeah, as Jenna said, yeah, we launched our craft collaborations fundraising project today. So I'm going to share a video with you. It's a couple of minutes long. Hope you stick around. And let's see.
Hi, I'm Jenna Stanton, the Executive Director at the Alberta Craft Council, and we have a really exciting project to share with you. We had a gala planned for this fall to support our activity in Calgary, and unfortunately, due to COVID, we had to cancel that event. But we shifted and used our creative minds to come up with a project that we thought would be fun for our artists to connect with each other and build community during these isolating times. So what we came up with was craft collaborations. We invited artists to apply to work with each other, or some adventurers, some individuals applied on their own, and we matched them up with another artist. And what we have is 47 artists who collaborated on great one-of-a-kind pieces that are going to be available for an online auction starting September 10th. This collaboration also ensures that the artists get paid for their work. So artists are receiving 50% of the retail value of their work through this auction, and any proceeds above and beyond that go to the Craft Council to support our exhibition and other programming, and creating more opportunities for artists to get paid presenting webinars, lectures, and hands-on demonstrations. This is a really great opportunity to collect one-of-a-kind collaborations from some stellar artists in Alberta, so we hope our friends from across the country can join us. We're really excited about the work that's been created as part of this series, and look forward to welcoming our friends from across the country to join us online from September 10th to 30th for the auction. And we'll have a few live events as well, so some interviews with artists and behind the scenes into their process, and a live event on September 30th. Thank you so much. We'll see you online for virtual elbows out bidding, artist talks, and our closing event.
There you have it.
Thanks, Victoria, for doing that video, and hopefully everyone can join us and check out the auction online. It kicks off today.
And I think you've already been shopping.
You never stop shopping when you work at the Alberta Craft Council.
Tell me about it. It's good stuff. Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. That was fun. That was good. And thanks, Charles. It was nice seeing you again. It's like, I feel like I've got the
Oh,
whole world in my
beautiful.
hand.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Right. And it's got gold on it. It's not many of them have the gold.
No, I love that one
Congratulations.
where the gold gets all over the
Yeah.
rock as well.
So my husband brought it. It was a surprise. And he sort of said, it looks like an astrolabe. And I look at it and I think, I just feel like I'm holding the world. There's
It
no
looks like a
question.
compass, kind of.
Yeah,
like
a
there's
compass.
something.
It's the world. It's, you know.
Mm.
And it doesn't have the angles of caging, like the grid,
No, no,
Mhm.
right?
that's a good one.
Isn't that gorgeous?
That's
lot
a
of
lovely
movement.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Jennifer.
Yeah. Ta-da.
I think Charles is on a lot of people's craft bucket list or covet list. I know he's
One of his other ones. I'll just be right back.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm wearing my Charles ring. It's just a little one. You can't really see it that well, but
Let me see.
oh, put it back
I
up.
am.
Megan, we'll
No,
share
it's
here.
my
mm.
one of my favorite
yeah,
little
nice.
pieces. So nice little square. People are always like, "Is the square uncomfortable?" I'm like, "You've never worn anything that isn't round, have you?" It's very comfortable. Oh,
Jennifer's
put
got
Jennifer
the
back up.
bracelet.
She's got a nice
Okay,
one.
okay.
How's that
We're gonna
one?
have to do
Wow.
a.
Those are the raw rubies.
Beautiful.
Gorgeous.
I'm coming to your house, Jennifer.
I know, isn't it nice? There we are.
Wow.
Does anyone else in our audience have a Charles piece they want to show us?
Oh, I see
Oh,
Mindy. Mindy's got a
okay,
nice one
Let's
too.
see. Let me spot
Mindy's got a
you,
couple.
Mindy.
Oh, good,
Oh,
good.
good.
Yay.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Mindy, where are you? Let me see. Are you in Edmonton? No.
You're not, have your mic on.
Yeah, I unmuted. Yes, I'm in Atlanta.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
And
In
how do you know
Florida?
Charles and his work?
From workshops and craft.
That's
Good.
amazing.
Theater.
That's where you're likely to run into him.
Yeah. Yeah.
At a craft show or a workshop.
Mhm.
Or walking down the halls of an art center.
Yeah, good things.
Absolutely. All right. Was that our break?
I don't have a piece of Charles' work, but I have a little story that will take him back a long time, and perhaps he doesn't recall, but I do. Many years ago, I was asked to set up the gift shop at the Nickel Art Galleries at the university. I came to your studio, and you had such wonderful work. And there was a piece that caught my eye while I was there, and I asked you about it. And you said, oh, it's a wand. And I've always felt that everyone should have a magic wand. I wasn't in a position to buy it, but I did ask you if you would give it to us for the shop with your other things, and just to indulge me because it was so magnificent and had such a spirit to it. And you were very relaxed. You said, oh, sure. So I took it, and it was, let's just say, not within the realm of most university students' budgets, to put it nicely. However, when I brought it in, they looked at me and said, what were you thinking? And I said, I wasn't thinking, I was feeling. So we put it in the shop. 2 weeks later, I was going to a board meeting. And I came in, and the young lady who ran the shop was going crazy. Oh, Linda, you're not going to believe this. You won't believe this. We sold the magic wand. And I, of course, said, oh, did you find that strange? And she said, well, it was such an expensive object. I said, well, who bought it? And the person that bought it was one of the heads of the music department, and she was a conductor. And she, I'm sure to this day, is using that when she conducts. So
Cool.
that's my story, and I'm
That's a
sticking to it.
beautiful story.
Yeah, it was lovely. And it validated my, what I was doing even better. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Charles, do you want to take back if I had a wand, I would point it at you and instruct you to take on the next step. How are you feeling about moving forward?
Sounds great. Okay, so let's see if I can resume. Yep, all right.